In this part, I'm going to try to explain the foreign exchange market, or the foreign exchange component of this model that Mankiw has tied together in this chapter. And then I'll try to tie all three of these together the way they're presented in the textbook. So I'm going to hopefully help you to follow them part by part this way. So here, when we're looking at foreign exchange, we're talking about a number of, let's say, dollars down here. Actually, I'm just going to use the dollar sign just for ease and speed, because in a second I think that'll be clear why. Over here in Mankiw, he just writes the exchange rate. And I find that confusing because you're exchanging one thing for another, and I like to have clarity about what is being exchanged for what. And I'm not the only one. Other textbooks have this, and I do really like our textbook, but I wish it was a little clearer. If you read through, you can find it stated in the text, but why not just have it right there with the model? So I'm going to try to do that for you up here. So when we're talking about the exchange rate, when the dollars are the good that are down here, we're talking about how many of the foreign currency, let's say the euro, per dollar are being bought and sold. And yes, that's a math symbol right there, the fraction, the fraction here. I'm turning that into a fraction. But it's actually helpful for us to do it as a fraction. I know students don't like fraction. They get all shaky in the knees. Bear with me. That says euros per dollar. Or if you think about a fraction as being simplified, it's how many of this to how many of that. A fraction is another expression of a ratio, which can then be converted into a decimal, which can then be converted into a percent. But it is a ratio. And I think that's helpful here. So again, when we're looking at dollars down here, then up here, we're talking about how many euros per dollar can be bought or sold, or how many yen per dollar, or won per dollar, whatever the other currency is. That's the exchange rate listed in our book. We have a downward sloping demand curve. Because at higher exchange rates, people would want fewer dollars. If dollars could buy more euros, people would want fewer dollars, all else held constant. Now, our supply curve in this model that we're looking at now is vertical. And usually when we have vertical curves, what that means is it's given from something somewhere else outside of the model. It's determined by some other force. And so that's another way to say that this doesn't affect it. It just is outside of this. Something else might shift it, but this doesn't cause any change in this. So a vertical curve is really expressing that for us. Another way to express it in 10-cent terms is that this is perfectly inelastic, meaning it's not responsive to whatever this is over here. It's not going to change because of what this does. So then we have our equilibrium exchange rate. That's the symbol for a euro, at least I think I have it right. So we're sitting in equilibrium. Now the outside force in our model that causes this supply curve to be here and to be vertical is the net capital outflow. When the quantity of net capital outflow increases, the supply curve in this model shifts to the right and pushes down. This is due to a net capital outflow increase. And that pushes down on the amount of euros a dollar will buy. And that amounts to more dollars being transacted in this market. Oops, I didn't put an asterisk or indicate anything about that being the new one. So downward pressure on the exchange rate. One other thing that is in our text that I find a little challenging to apply to the models that are being talked about in the text is that an arrow down here means a depreciation of the currency. It's weaker when it's depreciated. An appreciation of the currency means it's stronger. Let's confirm using our fraction that that makes sense. This is why I actually like having the fraction over there, even though I know students don't typically like to deal with fractions. If you think about a fraction that maybe we're all comfortable with, let's start with 1/3. Just think about a third and how the top and the bottom interact and make the quotient change. I think we all know that if we change this to a decimal, it's 0.3 repeating, right? 1/3 is 0.3 repeating. Everyone's pretty comfortable with that. Now let's think about what happens if we change the top and the bottom and what that does to that quotient, what it makes it become, something bigger or something smaller. Here there are more dollars in circulation. If you increase the bottom of a fraction, like let's go from 3 to 4 on the bottom, so we would be going from 1/3 to 1/4. The bottom got bigger. Here we have more dollars. The bottom's getting bigger, right? Put a different way, we have an increase in supply in this market for these dollars. So the bottom's getting bigger. When we move from 1/3 to 1/4, what does that do to that in decimal form? What does it do to that quotient? Does it make it get bigger or smaller? It makes it get smaller. We all know that this is 0.33 and this is 0.25. When you increase the bottom of a fraction, the quotient gets smaller, holding constant at the top. If we increase the number of euros per dollars, or if we decrease the number of dollars, holding constant the number of euros, we could be going from having a 3 down here to having a 2 down here. If we went from 1/3 down to 1/2, or if we decrease the bottom of a fraction, 1/2 is 0.5. 0.5 is bigger than 0.33. So when we increase the bottom of a fraction, when we decrease the bottom of a fraction, we increase the quotient of the fraction. I hope my little stutter step didn't mess anyone up there. This was 1/3. If I decrease the bottom to a 2, but I keep the same on the top, now it's called 1/2. I decreased the bottom. What did I do to the whole thing? I made it bigger. Again, when you decrease the bottom of the fraction, keeping the top the same, you make its quotient a bigger thing. And so over here, if I decrease the money supply instead of the way I did it with that green marker, if I went this way, this would be smaller. The dollars would be the smaller number on the bottom. The quotient would be bigger. So it would be moving this way. So it all does make sense. And I'm going through all that to help you hopefully understand the model, of course, because I try. But also that gives you a way to check your work when you're doing these questions. If you can use what I'm suggesting here and remember that the thing that's being counted on this axis is what's on the bottom of the fraction up here compared to other things. Whatever it could, you could just have other currencies up there. If it's just a basket of foreign currencies, perhaps in the question. If you think that through, you can check yourself, because a lot of these questions are, if this goes this way, blank, this goes blank, and that goes blank. And you have to fill in with rises, falls, falls, rises, rises, falls, falls again, rises again, well, whatever. Sometimes these questions can have 4 or 5 blanks in them, and it's very easy to get twisted and turned around. So what I'm hoping to do is to provide you a little bit of a roadmap to avoid those twists and turns. And I think thinking about that fraction up there might be one of those roadmaps. So now what I've done is looked at each of the 3 parts of these models that we're tying together here in this chapter. Clearly, the next thing we need to do is to begin to tie the 3 together. So I'm going to stop recording, give you a chance to digest this, back up, do what you need to do, and I'll see you in the next piece.